Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
But the president ran on putting America first and making us great again. And you can see that our economy is responding to that. Our economy is responding in a great way to that. We have job reports that are repeating over and over, breaking records of expectations.
But that's got nothing to do with the trade war. I don't understand what the relationship between a trade war and jobs.
It does.
When? How?
Well, this has to do about moving our economy first. Every business owner, as you said yourself, I'm a business owner.
Yeah.
Every business owner wants to expand our market. We have companies from other countries doing business inside our country, and we're not able to do business in their country. That's what we're talking about.
But that's not
free
the case
trade.
with Canada.
If you want
or
to have
Mexico,
20%,
I don't know what you're talking about. This is puzzling to me. Can you give me one example of raw materials getting snuck through Canada and not being charged with adequate tariffs and duties? Like, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, let's talk. You said that's not accurate with Mexico and Canada. Let's talk about Mexico themselves. You got our products. You got Ford that used, or not Ford, but Wranglers that used to be made in my district in Oklahoma. That now Wranglers are being produced in Mexico and being brought and sold, which I got a pair on as we speak. You have Fords. The trucks and other parts that are being made down in Mexico.
But that's under NAFTA. That's not illegal.
Yeah, I know it's not illegal, but what I'm saying is we're trying to renegotiate NAFTA.
But that's what we were doing. There wasn't renegotiation of NAFTA
unless they're forced to come back to the table.
There were actual renegotiations going on when President Trump came in and dropped this bomb.
No, there wasn't. They weren't really wanting to talk to us, and why would they? Because it's been great for their country. And the only way this is going to happen is if the president forces them to come back. And that's what we're doing. We want to keep Canada as a trade partner.
But they were at the table, Congressman.
This
is nonsense. They were actually at the table. There was all three countries had their delegations at a NAFTA renegotiation. This has been going on.
And what was the outcome of that?
They've been negotiating. They were doing things until President Trump decided that
they were trying to protect what they had. Mexico was trying to protect what they had, and they weren't willing to give anywhere. This is us being able to move forward. I want to have a good, strong NAFTA deal, but not the one we have right now. I want to have one that creates jobs here inside the United States, not creates jobs in Mexico and Canada.
You weren't here for my earlier discussion. I mean, the numbers of jobs created by NAFTA in the United States are probably in the hundreds of thousands. But
we've also lost a lot of jobs inside the United States, too.
We gain jobs, we lose jobs every single month. Every single month, that's how it goes. We've had years of job creation since 2009, since April of 2009.
Yeah, but we were losing a lot of jobs too, and that's why our economy was flat. Now that our economy is climbing,
wasn't flat. Our economy hasn't been flat. Congressman,
when you're running,
what are you doing this for?
GDP
I don't understand
growth,
what you're saying. You're making up facts in front of me. I mean, I'm a business journalist, right?
Okay, so and
I didn't just fall off the Canadian turnip truck.
Do what? I'm sorry.
I didn't just fall off the Canadian turnip truck. I've actually been studying business for a while.
But you're saying that our economy was strong before the president came in to
that's actually what I said. The U.S. economy was strong before Donald Trump became president. You're not going to deny that to me now.
No, it was climbing at a very snail pace. Are you saying that the economy isn't better than it is now than it was before the president came in?
This is a weird circular conversation, sir. Maybe we'll get a chance to do it again.
What I'm saying
that just doesn't make any sense. When there's economic growth every month over the growth before, you can't say the economy is stronger now than it was then.
It is. You can't deny it is. Look at the growth that we've had.
Because we've been having unemployment lower for the last 9 years.
It is Tuesday, the 12th of June of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, folks. Yes, indeed. Well, had a little bit of a snafu this morning. I made the bad mistake of updating the OS system on the Mac Mini, and though that's not on the broadcast function, I have the MacBook for that. The Mac Mini seemed like it was frozen, and but now I'm reading that it could be. But wait, 1, 2, maybe 10 hours. And so the lesson learned is never update the OS system before your show. Don't. Or at least not right before the show. Give it a day or two. So we're letting it sit for a while to see if it is indeed frozen. Okay, well, we'll see. It seems frozen. It's been hours. Well, not hours, but it's been a long time. Almost hours. All right, well, enough of that. So I'm a little turned around. I have to go back to another computer, and things are just a little backwards physically, and you get a muscle memory when you start doing this, so I have to think about where I'm at because I moved the wrong way. Yeah. All right, let's bring up, okay, so, we had a North Korean summit. It looked like a pretty good photo op for the most part. I think that's what it was for. I'm not too sure if we're going to war yet. We may. You never know. He makes agreements with people. Oh, yeah, I'll sign that. Then he's on the plane. He goes, screw them. So we'll see what happens. He may revert back to the Rocket Man invective. Or I don't know. Maybe it's a term of affection. Maybe Kim likes that. He may. Let's see. Trump says has good relationship with Canada's Trudeau after the G7 meeting. Well, that's good, because it looks to me like they were at odds with each other and sniping. Larry Kudlow had a heart attack. We don't know if it was one of those convenient heart attacks, but his wife said that he is rather chipper, talking on the phone, writing notes, and but in a hospital bed. So, I don't want to wish ill fortune on anyone, but Larry Kudlow did seem a little agitated, like maybe the cocaine's catching up with him. Oh, yeah, Otto Warmbier. Remember him? No, you don't. Yes, you do. Well, he was an American student who I think had stole a sign or poster or some innocuous item. And he was arrested by the North Koreans while visiting there. And beat to hell, tortured, and beat to hell again, and then recently, last year or whatever, fairly recently, they let him come back, except he was in a coma and died shortly after getting back to the United States. Well, Trump says that Otto Warmbier, his death was not in vain because, Trump got the summit. Well, a lot of us thought that maybe Otto was forgotten in all of this, or maybe Otto wasn't even known to the major principal, one Donald J. Trump. He didn't know. He got told later. All right. Well, I guess what we should do is look at what we will attend to today. Okay, let's open up that screen. Well, starting off at the top here in the Bistro Cafe, that was Trump apologist Representative Markwayne Mullin. Markwayne Mullin, yeah, he comes from Oklahoma. And, of course, he joined Ali Velshi and started spouting a bunch of lies about economics. Because this guy's used to talking to his constituency. He can say anything, and they'll believe him. And Ali had to keep reminding him, look, I am a business reporter. This is my beat. You're telling me 2 + 2 is 5, and I'm telling you that you are lying. Lying! Velshi was not pleased at all. And this guy just, I don't know. Is this how they are taught in their farm clubs? You know, because the right wing does have farm clubs. Identify talent, put them where they can do the work. Sometimes it's in, you know, as a representative, as an elected official. Sometimes it's as a talking head on a propaganda news station. Sometimes it's both. Well, this guy, I don't know, he was undaunted and continued on spouting the lies. I think it's also called gish galop. You know, where you just saturate with noise and information, and every time you try to attack one point, you know, the person is on to 10 other points, and then expecting you to knock them all down in order, too, by the way. And if you don't, you're a loser and you lose the argument. Yeah, gish galop. Well, like I said, Velshi was not impressed. On the rest of the menu, California fire investigators conclude that the state's largest utility, and that would be Pacific Gas and Electric, caused 12 wildfires that burned over 300,000 acres and killed scores of people. Now, I say scores because the numbers are still out from one fire that they're still concluding whether that was PG&E related, in which about 43 deaths had occurred just in that fire. Neil Gorsuch wrote an opinion so radical that even Clarence Thomas wouldn't join it. Yeah, well, you know, when you leave a seat open for a whole year so Trump can install, you get what you get. And the only thing scarier to Jeff Sessions than MS-13, that's right. The only thing scarier than MS-13 are the rape victims of MS-13. You cannot come in here, lady. You were raped. You want sanctuary and asylum? No, you are a criminal. Jeff Sessions is, well, I don't know. He's evil. After the break, we move to the chef's table where, speaking of evil, Mick Mulvaney threatens the Associated Press to change its style manual from calling the department the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection. Because he wants to burn the place down, and he is a petty tyrant. And Trump won't fund a veterans bill he just made a big deal about signing. Because petty tyrants do that. And Trump, he never pays his bills anyway, we keep telling you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice to the right-ish of the page is the chat room link, and Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, monitors that for your convenience. And to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll find the contribute donate buttons. And they are an integral part of this operation because we are unable to do this without you. And your generosity is greatly appreciated, and there's no joke about that. So truly and sincerely, thank you. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and has a few pithy remarks that are timely. That's why they're pithy. And you can check us out on Facebook. We're there because, I don't know, because we are. So far, our speeds haven't been throttled, but now that there's no net neutrality, Aaron Swartz is turning in his grave. Hopefully we'll turn that over so that Resistance Radio isn't impacted too much by the obvious strategies. Yeah. But, so Facebook, that's right. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam and follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West. I don't know. I'm sorry. I left it up to their algorithm by mistake, and now we're stuck. So, at Cookbook West. What else? Oh, of course, podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's get into this first article here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is by Mark Hand out of Think Progress. Now, this is the story of the wildfires in California, where 12 fires thus far have been identified as being caused by Pacific Gas and Electric infrastructure. Trees falling on wires, that sort of thing. Now, these 12 cases have been referred to district attorneys' offices for criminal prosecution. So, officials from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, known as CAL FIRE, were the lead investigators in the numerous wildfires, including a wildfire that became known as the Atlas Fire in Napa County, that burned a total of about almost 52,000 acres, destroyed 783 structures, and caused 6 deaths. Cal determined this fire was one of the most destructive in Northern California, or of the Northern California fires, and that started in 2 locations. One location where a large tree limb broke and came into contact with a PG&E power line, and a second location where investigators determined a tree fell onto the same power line. CAL FIRE's findings have now been sent to the county district attorney's offices for review. The investigation could have huge financial ramifications for PG&E if regulators in the courts determine the company must bear financial responsibility. Well, they should be submitted for criminal prosecution, but I believe the DAs will determine that in their reviews. So, I might have jumped the gun a little bit. Maybe I was being salacious. Yeah, that's it. Because these crooks should go to jail. And you know what's going to happen? Because the way the structure is set up, and you know, it was for, you know, a good meaning, a good reason. You know, taxpayers will pay for it. Ratepayers will pay for it. Maybe both. Because the company itself won't. Because it's a quasi-government company. Well, PG&E is facing dozens of lawsuits over the Northern California fires that altogether killed 44 people and caused an estimated $10 billion in damages. That's B with a billion. Yeah. The implications of this for shareholders are not good, Michael Wera, director of the Climate and Energy Policy Program at Stanford University, said. It appears that PG&E is going to bear some fault here. Shares of PG&E Corp., the parent company of Pacific Gas and Electric, have dropped about 4.5% to $39 per share since CAL FIRE released its wildfire investigations late Friday night. The company's equity value has dropped dramatically over the past 7 months. PG&E's stock price was trading near $70 per share in early October of 2017, immediately prior to the start of the ferocious wildfire season. PG&E said in a statement that it is reviewing CAL FIRE's reports on the wildfires. Based on the information we have so far, we continue to believe our overall programs met our state's high standards. And that was a company statement released on Friday after the report was released. The Northern California fires occurred in October, the month when the state sees its worst wildfires. Elsewhere in the state, wildfires continued into December of 2017 and early 2018. Higher temperatures and drier conditions, driven in part by climate change, are lengthening the season when Californians can expect the worst wildfires. Okay, so of course, electric utilities have been citing climate change, not faulty utility practices. See, there's no such thing as climate change until you get blamed for your faulty practices, okay? Then they believe it. Oh, no, it wasn't us. Act of God, act of God. And everything else, they are the God. You know, if it happens, it was an act of God. And here it is, too. All right. So 7 of California's 10 largest modern wildfires occurred in the last 15 years, just as predicted in this reporter's, learned opinion, shall we say. Because we were only talking about this back in the 70s. And everybody said, oh, you're just a punk hippie. And I said, I'm a punk. All right. We are committed to advocating with the legislative leaders and policymakers across the state on comprehensive legislative solutions for all Californians as we collectively seek to meet the challenge of climate change and position the California economy for success, PG&E said. The politically powerful utility company also noted that California is one of the only states in the country where the courts have applied inverse condemnation liability in events associated with utility-owned equipment. Hey, utility is at the very least, a quasi-government entity. You're not just a private company, pal. This means PG&E could be liable for property damages and attorney's fees even if the company followed established inspection and safety rules, PG&E said. We're going to get hit by things we should not be hit for. California courts have held utilities liable regardless of fault by applying inverse condemnation, a principle typically applied to governments, not to private entities. Like a government entity, the same logic has been applied to utilities that have millions of customers. Electric utilities can socialize or spread wildfire costs among their company customers in the form of rates. In its investigation, CAL FIRE linked several other destructive Northern California wildfires to PG&E infrastructure. These include the Redwood fire that killed 9 people in Mendocino County, burning 36,500 acres. And destroying 543 structures. The fire was caused by trees or parts of trees falling onto power lines. The Norborn, Adobe, Patrick, Pythian, and Nuns fire were part of a series of fires that merged in Sonoma and Napa counties and resulted in 3 deaths. These 2 were tied to PG&E, investigators found. A total combined acres burned was 56,556, with almost 1,400 structures destroyed. 4 of those fires were caused by trees falling onto PG&E power lines. The 5th fire, the Pythian, was caused by a down line that came into contact with the ground after PG&E tried to re-energize it. Okay, and investigators also looked at the Pocket Fire in Sonoma County, which burned a total of 17,357 acres and destroyed 6 structures. CAL FIRE determined the fire was caused by the top of an oak tree breaking and coming into contact with PG&E power lines. CAL FIRE also found no evidence that PG&E violated state regulations in the wildfires, known as the 37 fire, the Nuns Fire in Sonoma County, and the Cherokee Fire in Butte County, even though PG&E power structure was involved. And the deadliest fire in Northern California in 2017, the Tubbs Fire, killed 43 people in Sonoma County, and CAL FIRE has yet to complete its investigation in that fire. Ian Millhiser from Think Progress penned this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. For more than a quarter century, Justice Clarence Thomas served as the Supreme Court's daft old uncle. Under Thomas's reading of the Constitution, federal laws ranging from child labor laws to minimum wage laws to the ban on whites-only lunch counters are all unconstitutional. Thomas once argued that the First Amendment does not apply to high school students because 18th century fathers behaved like petty tyrants. But Thomas may have just been dethroned. Dissenting in Sveen v. Mellon, Neil Gorsuch tells Thomas to hold his beer. Well, what was it that Gorsuch did? Well, this case is a sort of routine cleanup case that justices often hand down after a lower court goes too far out on a limb and needs to be reined in. It involves a Minnesota law that, among other things, governs how life insurance policies should handle divorces. Now, if you get a divorce, if you had a life insurance policy and your spouse was a beneficiary, it is just common that your spouse is no longer a beneficiary because your next spouse would be. How does Gorsuch see this? A contract is a contract is a contract. You made a contract to make this make this woman or man your beneficiary, and the contract cannot now be broken. What? In other words, you can't renegotiate a contract for higher pay because you already signed a contract. Well, that's kind of going a little bit too far, you would think, but his is the dissenting opinion. And, of course, in his dissenting opinion, he absolutely disregarded case law. You know, what we like to lovingly refer to as precedent. So, of course, the original Constitution forbids states from enacting a law impairing the obligation of contracts. According to Gorsuch's lone dissent, this means that any law that prevents an already existing contract from being enforced is invalid. Everything. This is the guy they held the seat open for a year because the black president wasn't allowed to have, well, another Supreme Court nomination. Here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Emily Crockett. Now, this Trump administration still thinks domestic violence is a private crime, not a systemic atrocity whose victims deserve our help. Mostly because they're brown, and you know that. Well, Jeff Sessions told tens of thousands of domestic violence victims that the abuse they've endured isn't a good enough reason to come to the United States for us to grant them asylum if they're forced to flee from their home countries. In other words, what Jeff Sessions is saying is that, look, we can't take, non-governmental actor abuses. That's not our responsibility. I mean, you're being sexually abused, you're beat to crap. Gangs are, killing your dad and brother and sister and grandma and grandpa. Nah. If your country can't take care of you, why should we? Well, I guess because Jeff Sessions never really was a true American, now was he? And Sessions' ruling overturned a major 2014 immigration case in which an unnamed Salvadoran woman was granted asylum because her husband violently abused her and the police didn't do enough to stop him. Before Sessions gutted it, that ruling was hailed by advocates as a major victory for women's rights. Under U.S. immigration law, refugees can apply for asylum if they have been persecuted based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or particular social group. Well, Sessions said the mere fact that a country may have problems effectively policing certain crimes, such as domestic violence or gang violence, or that certain populations are more likely to be victims of crime, cannot itself establish an asylum claim. Why should we take care of them? So it is telling. MS-13 is the worst scourge ever in the history of all the world. But the people fleeing, the violence perpetrated by this scary group, not good enough to get into the United States. All right, we know what it's about. It's about racism. And I'm looking at you, Stephen Miller. You were in this too. Okay. Well, let's get on to our break, and we'll come back, go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
On average, gun violence claims the lives of nearly 100 people every day in the United States. People are dying of gun violence in our homes, in our churches, in our schools, on our street corners, and at public gatherings.
David O. Barb, president of the American Medical Association. He spoke June 9th at the AMA annual meeting in Chicago.
We've recommended common sense gun safety protections, waiting periods and background checks for those seeking to purchase a gun, and increased funding for mental health services. We've called upon the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to conduct epidemiological research on gun violence. It is perhaps the only leading cause of death where such research is not being conducted. To those who feel we should not address this as an organization because it is too controversial, I would ask, did we shy away from fighting discrimination against AIDS patients in the early days of that epidemic, even though much of society stigmatized those with HIV? No. We let science lead us. And did we mute our opposition to smoking because big tobacco defended it? No. We let science lead us. And even now, have we backed away from our support on universal vaccinations or the gains made through the Affordable Care Act because they're controversial? No. We've let science lead us. So similarly, I would submit to you that the AMA must not back down from addressing gun violence. On the contrary, we must address it head on, scientifically, in an evidence-based, principled fashion, and with the health and safety of our communities, our fellow Americans, and our children as our chief concern. While we will not all agree on every proposal introduced on gun violence, we can all agree that this issue must be addressed, and that the only responsible way forward is for women and men of good faith to continue to search for and advocate for science-based solutions.
For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. There is no single organization in the world that has the power to force countries to settle conflicts peacefully. There are some organizations that help countries reach agreements without going to war. The most important worldwide organization is the United Nations. A treaty signed in 1945, after World War II, created the United Nations. The purposes of the United Nations, according to its charter, are to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, cooperate in solving international economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian problems, and promote respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Most nations of the world are members of the United Nations. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day known in the San Francisco labor movement as Bloody Tuesday. In the early 20th century, San Francisco was a city with a strong union movement. In early May, the Carmen's Union called a strike against United Railroads, the company that ran the city's transit system. 1,500 carmen walked off the job, demanding an 8-hour workday and a $3 per day wage. The strike began on a Sunday. The city's transit lines stood silent. The next day, tensions began to mount. The company put up barbed wire around the car barns. Strikers believed this was in preparation to get the streetcars back up and running. Strikers and supporters gathered around the car barns. The day passed with nothing happening. But the next morning, as picketers gathered, 6 cars rolled out of the barns. Hired guns rode with the scab drivers. Angry picketers attempted to stop the streetcars, bombarding them with bricks and stones. Gunfire erupted between the armed company guards and the picketers. 2 picketers were killed in the hail of gunfire. Many more were injured. But this bloody day was not the end of the injuries. It's estimated that 24 people were killed in accidents while scab drivers operated the streetcars. Strikes by public transportation workers were often some of the most contested work actions to take place in big cities. These workers had the ability to impact work sites far beyond their own, since they transported laborers to work. The magnitude of a transportation strike would ripple throughout a city, and these strikes were often met with fierce resistance. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Monday, June 11th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. The Trump administration in the United States has imposed tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum products entering the U.S. from the European Union, Mexico, and Canada. Canada has responded by saying that on July 1st, it will impose equivalent tariffs on steel and aluminum from the U.S., plus tariffs on a wide range of other products, including boats, yogurt, and maple syrup. Canada's tariffs equal the $12.8 billion US dollars worth of tariffs that the United States is imposing. I talked to Ken Newman about the tariffs. Mr. Newman is the National Director for Canada for the United Steelworkers Union. The USW is the largest private sector union in North America with 800,000 members, including more than 225,000 members in Canada. The Trump administration has argued that the tariffs it has imposed are necessary because the U.S. has been taken advantage of by Canada and it has to react. I asked Mr. Newman what he thinks of this argument.
Well, I think there's absolutely no justification for these tariffs, and the facts just bear that out. I mean, Canada is not seen as a bad trading partner, and for the U.S. Say that they are is just absurd. The U.S. has a trade surplus in steel shipments to Canada, and there's 35 or 36 U.S. states that also have a trade surplus. There's been the integrated market for decades that has worked relatively well, and the 25% not only just penalizes workers in Canada, it'll also penalize workers in the U.S. Because of the integration of the market, there's $1 billion worth of trade that crosses our borders every single day. And for example, in steel or aluminum, some of the materials that are put into vehicles may cross the Canadian-U.S. border 3-4 times before it's turned into a final product. So them to suggest for a second that Canada's been unfair is just not anywhere near the truth, and it's not a national security issue. They've had some testimony from some high-ranking people in the United States that have even said that Canada is not the problem. The problem, quite frankly, is that the glut in the industry or the dumping of foreign steel is what you need to get your arm around. You have China and other countries such as India, Korea, and Turkey and Vietnam and that continue to dump and are not playing by the rules. So I can understand where President Trump's trying to come from, is that you've got the dumping of cheap foreign steel is having an effect, and the same thing is having the effect on Canada as well. So we need our governments on both sides to make sure that we protect our industries and the integration in North America, but don't beat up on each other, because the tariffs or trade war would not make any sense. And our view is that all this is going to do is to harm our members in both countries. And so to me, it's short-sighted. But look, my bottom line on this is it's got nothing to do with the steel or aluminum of us being a threat. I view it as that this is President Trump's way of retaliation because he didn't get the NAFTA agreement that he wanted. If you remember very early in his mandate, when he talked about reopening NAFTA and the conversations he had with Trudeau, he basically admitted that, look, Canada is not the problem. All we need is a couple of tweaks, I think was the phrase that he used. And if you look at what they're asking for in that particular agreement, it's fairly significant changes to NAFTA, which Canada clearly can't agree to. So therefore, he's now come with these punishing duties because he didn't get what he wanted. And he's also not that far away from his midterm elections. And if you recall, during his presidential election, he talked about NAFTA being the worst agreement, going to tear it up, going to make America great again, bring back all these jobs. So his focus is that he has to prop up this rhetoric to basically get to his base because usually in midterms it doesn't sit that well for the incumbent. So that's where I see it at, sir, is it's ill-advised to have those tariffs, and it's got more to do with the midterm elections that are coming down, I think, in November.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From Singapore, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. President Trump is said to be entering a historic day of direct talks with North Korea's Kim Jong-un with confidence, a positive attitude, and an eagerness for real progress. That's according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
He has made it clear that if Kim Jong-un denuclearizes, there is a brighter future for North Korea. Tomorrow, we will get our clearest indication to date of whether Chairman Kim Jong-un truly shares this vision.
After months of playing up the possibility that a major deal to eliminate North Korea's nuclear program could be inked here in Singapore, the goalposts have seemed to shift considerably. North Korean envoys are said to have complicated recent talks with the U.S. by refusing to concede that elimination of the country's nuclear program is an item up for debate, and that raises serious questions about what's possible in talks, given the U.S. insistence that international sanctions won't even be weakened until the North's nuclear program is gone. That's where possible other concessions from the U.S. could come in.
We are prepared to make security assurances necessary for the North Koreans to engage in that denuclearization. That is, we're prepared to take actions that will provide them sufficient certainty that they can be comfortable that denuclearization isn't something that ends badly for them. Indeed, just the opposite.
Pompeo said Monday those security guarantees would be different from anything ever offered before, fueling speculation the U.S. could sign on to a process ending the Korean War or eventually pulling U.S. troops out of Korea. Joe Cirincione, president of the nuclear disarmament group, the Plowshares Fund, says that would turn U.S. thinking on its head, and maybe for the better.
It's quite possible that Donald Trump, by being unconventional, by flipping the script, by putting the summit meeting first in the process, by having talk of a peace treaty first in the process, he might actually, however inadvertently, be creating the conditions that would actually allow North Korea to take some bold steps.
Luke Vargas, Singapore.
All right, thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Oh, yeah. Well, because the Mac Mini is frozen, or at least cycling through its Mac OS update, and I'm still waiting for some protocols before I go through the instructions on how to unfreeze a Mac Mini during updates. Oh my God. I don't have the proper world cities on this other computer that I have, unfortunately. So darn. But we do have weather here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees, and we will be going to a high of around 88 to 90, so a little warmer than yesterday. We'll have a low tonight of about 55 degrees. Winds currently are out of the north at about 1 mile per hour. We'll be shifting out of the north-northwest in a few hours at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we'll continue that direction out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour through tonight till tomorrow early. And, okay, so scour it. And maybe it'll cool it off. Maybe it'll warm it up. We don't know. Dry conditions will continue. Grass pollen remains very high. I have no data on air quality. UV index is still very high at 9. Ouch. Take care. High pressure dominates at 30.28 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is 79%. So I would give you weather from around the world, and because people planted personal purchased weather stations on their property, and they positively live around the world. But all I can give you right now is Paris is 65 and cloudy. Munich, we never do Munich, but they are 73 degrees with light rain and thunder and a weather advisory because of that thunder. And I guess I should mention Germany, since my son will be going to Germany next week. So good for him. Let's see. Boston is 70 and partly cloudy. Chicago is 68 and cloudy. Manhattan. Oh, I'm sorry. San Francisco is 60 and sunny. And New York, Manhattan to be specific on this particular bar, is 69 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Okay, starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for our first big offering of a small little tasting menu is Out of Think Progress by Addie Bear. Now, it was a big day for name changes. You know, IHOP joked around changing their name to the International House of Burgers. Hey, International House of Poutine. Now, that would be something. Burgers. Come on. Or, I don't know. Maybe Burger King should, change their name to Bleenie King. I'd like a Bleenie King, please. A Whopper Bleenie King. Yep, fully loaded. Do it. Well, Mick Mulvaney wants to burn down. He's got a crusade to burn it all down. Burn it down, all down. And so he's upset that the CFPB hasn't changed their name to what he said it should be, which is the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, the BCFP. And he's grown increasingly frustrated, of course, with people calling it by its wrong name, going so far to call up the Associated Press. And because the Associated Press in their AP style manual continues to call it the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And since most other news organizations follow the AP style manual, that's how it continues to be identified, and Mick Mulvaney cannot stand that. And so they've he himself and other political appointees have and staff under Mulvaney have been hammering the AP to change it. Well, I don't know. So of course we know that this was Elizabeth Warren's baby. And it came in under the Obama administration, and so it has to be burned down. All of it. Burn it all down.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Tommy Christopher at Share Blue Media penned this last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Well, you know what? Trump only cares about veterans when the cameras are on, because he will not fund a veterans bill that he just made a big deal about signing. Which is curious, because that's what Mick Mulvaney did over at CFPB. Is that he decided, Mick Mulvaney, I should have finished this up on the last story. Last quarter, he decided zero funding. They don't need it. Zero funding. They'll just use emergency funds to keep that department going. Because you don't really need any funds to say, hey, you're a payday lender? Gouge all you want. Well, Trump has a nasty habit of not paying bills either. And he has a habit of exploiting our military and veterans, is exceeded only by his talent for letting them down, as his recent actions regarding the so-called VA Mission Act demonstrate. Trump signed the bill into law last Wednesday during an elaborately staged ceremony in the Rose Garden at the White House, but hours after the cameras were shut off and the cast of grateful vets and politicians had dispersed, Trump began working against the law he had just signed. The night of the bill signing, Trump quietly released a statement objecting to 3 oversight provisions of the law, saying he would not treat them as mandatory. Several veterans groups expressed concern about the statement. Trump's White House also circulated a memo to Congress objecting to a Senate plan to pay for the Mission Act, arguing the law ought to be funded by spending cuts to other programs. Now, if Trump read, he probably would have seen these provisions in there in the first place. Wouldn't he? Why is it after the fact? Representative Tim Waltz, a Democrat from Minnesota, the ranking Democrat on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, explained to the Washington Post that the White House plan could shortchange other reforms for veterans. As it stands, current budget caps will not allow for this level of spending to occur without requiring deep cuts to existing VA programs, he said. This means current programs investing in VA infrastructure, direct patient care, suicide prevention, medical research, job training, and many more vital veterans programs could face cuts in funding in order to pay for care in the community under this new plan, something the veteran service organizations had warned against. This paints a clear picture of a VA forced to cannibalize itself in order to pay for care in the private sector. Unfortunately, multiple amendments offered by my fellow House Democrats and me to fix these funding issues were voted down by Republicans. It's just like Donald Trump to sign a deal and then not pay for it, said Will Fisher, a Iraq War veteran and director of government relations for Vote Vets, in a statement to Share Blue Media. So, as he's done many times in his life, Donald Trump has made a big production, but when it comes to paying, he's going to leave us high and dry. Trump's concern for veterans runs about as deep as last Wednesday's photo op. When the cameras are off, Trump shows the true colors of a leader who has consistently disrespected our bravest and lets them down at every turn. Indeed. And, well, heck, he did the same thing with the meeting with the G7 before he had to leave early to meet up with Kim Jong-un. Said he was going to sign the agreement, which was a rather innocuous agreement, and then on the plane said, "No, Trudeau stabbed me in the back." What? Well, it's a common theme in this with these den of thieves, and hopefully we'll be able to vote them out. And we'll talk about more about voting suppression, what seems like a pretty much Russian active measures now, wholly embraced and put into effect by the Republican Party and canonized by the Supreme Court. Thank you, Sam Alito. Yeah. Well, we better get out of here. We've run to the end of our broadcast period, but Netroots Radio broadcasts on for breaking news throughout the day. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, of course. That's what we do on Wednesdays. And so stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day, all night, 24/7, 365. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.